they really sing the song for me. It's so wonderful. That's Laura. That's for me.
Well, today we're going to talk about self-worth and building self-worth. And part of why this came up was we had a conversation about curveballs, life's curveballs. And when we experience those, a lot of times it might make us question our self-worth. And so I thought where we would start are some definitions of self-worth. Webster's says that self-worth is a feeling that you're a good person who deserves to be treated with respect. And the APA, or the American Psychological Association, says it's how you evaluate yourself as a capable and valuable person deserving respect and consideration. And it's an internal sense of being worthy of love. So lots of psychologists, researchers have looked at self-worth and what creates and builds self-worth. And amongst the elements is something called core beliefs. And Aaron Beck, who is considered the father of cognitive behavioral therapy, talked about core beliefs. And he talked about something called the cognitive triad, which is three elements. It's negative thinking about oneself, negative thinking about the world, and negative thinking about the future. And these things reinforce each other, and that creates a cycle of negative thinking and distress. And it's no surprise that low self-worth correlates with anxiety and depression. So why it's important to look at our self-worth and look at ways we can strengthen our self-worth is because self-worth does influence our willingness to try things, to have the confidence to try things. It also influences our relationships. If we have a low self-worth, we tend to put others' needs ahead of ourselves. In the end, we suffer a bit for that. But it also when it's strong, can help us set boundaries, healthy boundaries, right? And in that way, we still have voice and choice in things that happen to us. So today we're going to talk about our own thoughts around self-worth. What are some of the distractions we've experienced that have made us question or challenge our self-worth? And what are the tools that we use to maintain a good self-worth? Sound good?
Sounds very
Perfect.
interesting.
Lovely, lovely subject.
All right. So we're going to start with each of our own definitions of self-worth and let us know if you think you have a good self-worth, and maybe even if it wasn't always that way, but you reached that point. So we'll start with Laura.
Yeah, okay. Well, what is self-worth for me? I think it starts since you're a child. You know how the way they treat you, the way they talk to you. You know, as a child, I can definitely remember good memories. When I was a child, I always was surrounded with people with love. They give you, and actually, lots of values, value of respect, love, hearing the person, because as a child you're a child, you know, you don't count, go, but honestly it's so important to hear them as well, and I think that's what it is for me, the way you speak, the way you see it, since you're a child, and that's how you will grow.
And do you think the follow-up question is, do you think that you always had, I think that's a great point about starting when people are young to build that in. Do you think you always had a pretty good sense of self-worth, or you think it's something that you've grown into, that you've learned to have a better sense of self-worth?
Well, again, since I was the youngest of a family of six, I had a lot of challenges in my life, especially when you look at yourself and say, are you worth it? Because my mother and father were always busy with the brothers, the oldest. But again, you know, all I heard within my family, every time we got together for big reunions, you know, celebrations, it was all about respect, love, and values. My mama always mentioned values since I remember. So even though my brothers made me math, you know, because of course at that age it's like, you know, you don't worth, get out of here, don't listen to this, it's not for you, or things like that. You know, your mama is backing you up. The rest of the family and your friends, that's when you start saying, of course, you know, I'm value, and especially when they hear you, when they hear your needs.
For
Yeah.
sure. Mom, how about you? How do you define self-worth? And do you think you have a pretty good sense of self-worth?
Well, I would define self worth being mindful of what you can give. positive or value. Self-worth has to be a feeling or inside of you before going out to help others. Talking about our childhood, well, I grew up in the 1950s in Mexico in a more or less a strict type of regulations or social norms and whatnot. Although, of course, our family was very positive, like most families, with ups and downs. My father and my mother, since we were children, kind of instill in us values that you take in, like Tia Laura was saying, since you're small. In my time, it had to do a lot to somehow, I don't say wrong, but difficult, that depending on what they thought of you. The social norms, how you behave, how you dressed, for example. And it took some time for me to realize that your self-worth is something inside of you. It's not what others think, it's, the positive thing you can give to others and how you value yourself.
Yeah. So do you think over time, realizing that you were then able to look inward and strengthen your own self-worth?
Yes, because being at the beginning with this social behavior of the times, that you had to behave this way so the others would appreciate you or you fit in society, that was very important.
Mm-hmm.
And probably too important, because what is really worth it is inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
But at the beginning, for example, yeah, I might, I think even family would tell me and still tells me, you sometimes you put yourself down. You have to see that you're worth, more than what you think or the way you're behaving. And it took some time to realize, because, yeah, growing up, your childhood values and what you learn is critical to the way you're going to behave later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would agree with all of you. It's definitely something that you build up inwardly, right? It's inherent value of self with exclusion or regardless of external factors, which is what you're talking about, Mom, what's going on around you. And we're going to talk in a little bit about what our own distractions were that got in the way of our developing a good sense of self-worth. But I think a lot of people say self-esteem and self-worth interchangeably, but there is a little bit of a difference. And it is that piece, which is self-esteem, I think a lot of times is built on external factors. Like when you do well at something, your self-esteem increases. When you don't do well at something, your self-esteem goes down, right? But self-worth is a constant and it comes from your own sense of self, your own value of self. And that's how I see it. And I think now I would say I definitely have a better sense of my self-worth compared to when I was younger. And a lot of it had to do with the distractions, which we'll get into in a second. But I think I'm in a better place now. And for those that are listening, some of the ways you can start thinking about how do you define your own self-worth is you can ask yourself some questions like how much do you value and respect yourself? How would you describe yourself to a stranger? When you have self-thoughts, thoughts about yourself, are they generally positive or are they negative? So just to get people thinking about where they're at with their own self-worth. Now, we've all talked a little bit about where our self-worth is currently. I'm interested in knowing who taught you about the importance of self-worth, and you've all talked about yourselves and your family system, but I'm wondering if there was a particular person who really helped you focus on the importance of self-worth. So I'll start with Aunt Lauda.
Well, when I went to school, I guess at school as well, you can start feeling that you really worth when the people, the rest of the girls, in my case, I was educated in a non-school and they were all girls. They come to you and they ask you questions and they want to be with you, right? And the breaks are with you. So I really felt wonderful. There is a story that I'm going to tell you really quick, and I think your mama have heard it before. I don't know if that's self-worth or not, but I was probably like 6 years old, I would say. I don't remember exactly, but one day I came back from the school at my house and my mama says, "How was the school?" And I said, "Wonderful, mommy. I'm so happy. They always sing a song for me." Yeah, really? Oh, okay, great, great, And then the next day, the same thing. How was the school? Oh, mama, they really sing the song for me. It's so wonderful. So I really felt so proud of myself. Well, my mama was so curious. What kind of song is that for her, no? So she went to the school and talked to the teacher and said, you know what? I need to ask you. My daughter, 6 years old, she always come home and say, I'm so happy they sing the song for me. And she's like, really? Yeah. Every time she gets in school, you start singing the song. And she's, well, it's weird because we start singing, La hora de las clases ha llegado ya.
Laura.
I really felt wonderful. I was 6 years old until I realized what they said.
That's
Laura ha
hilarious. Laura,
So
Laura.
that's all I can tell you, ever since then. I was so
You
proud
have
of
to
myself.
explain that though, that la hora ha llegado is the hour has arrived, but
Yeah,
la hora
la
and
hora.
Laura.
Very
La
different.
hora de las clases ha llegado ya. Everybody sings so happily, and I go, wow, I really
Well,
worked.
I
They seem
mean, I
to.
think even as a kid to pick up, like, make that distinction, like you couldn't even make that distinction, maybe says that you already had some level of self-worth that you just figured, like, why wouldn't they be singing about you, right?
Well, the innocence as well, right? The innocence between innocent
Oh,
and, and
yes.
and being so happy to get there, right? And then you start hearing all these things. That's Laura. That's for me.
Little
But I think,
6 year old.
at home, mama always was there for us, for
Mhm.
my needs. Always asked me, how was the day? How you feel?
Mhm.
And especially, your mama is the same. I went to school. I went to study English when I was 15 years old, and you just born, and it was so funny because your mommy is the same way. I was so afraid to go to a junior high school without knowing the language, right? So many times I say, oh, and I feel sick, and she right away pamper me and say, don't worry, don't go to school, relax, stay home. So many times I miss school.
That is not
Oh,
helpful. That is not helpful.
No.
I had to push her more. Yeah, at first can be scary. A new language, a new school.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was very, very scared. And not only that, but I come from Mexico, a country that only is girls, a school for girls, a school for boys, and here is a mix, right? So I'm 15 years old, teenager, right? When you start opening your eyes and all these things, and all of a sudden you're in a school, in a classroom with half of the men, no,
Yeah,
teenagers, so that was really scary for me.
of
But I really
course.
enjoy it.
Well, of course, those are situational things that I think are normal to feel fear. And I think that's an influential part of, well, one, it makes you kind of reset and think about your self-worth, and it can be a situation that challenges those notions, especially in that particular situation that you went through, Aunt Lauda, because you have, a lot of new things going on, unique environment you're not accustomed to. So I think that's all pretty natural. But yes, having from the home a mom figure that definitely showed value in you by asking you questions, showing that what you thought mattered, I think all that influenced your self-worth. Mom, for you, who was the person, if there was a particular person that helped you understand the importance of self-worth?
Well, definitely our mother, but also our father. Our your grandfather had a very good value of self worth and values that made his self worth with teaching us, for example, what can you be positive input to you from you to society, like in our case, going to school, learning what can we contribute to family, to friends, to society, if you will, but always conscious, self-conscious of your self-worth, of the values you have inside, and you're going to remain with that, whatever other difficult circumstances, your self-worth and what you're worth, absolutely. But I would say, yeah, our father and our mother were a very strong, and that is amazing because, like Tia Laura says, we were 6.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first we were 4, and then after that the twins came, but it still was a big family.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow you have to give time, to all of them.
Right.
And more than anything, their example. I think they're a very strong example of self-worth.
Yeah, I think it's how they show you even their own sense of self-worth. But like you say, in a large family, it can be challenging, right? Because you have to give each child the space to see that they're unique and have something to offer. That's how you build on their self-worth. And I would say for me, it was definitely the two of you. And through school, and I think this played into some of my distractions, I think finding teachers and mentors that actually gave you the time and the space and made you feel valuable. And we'll get into the distractions now, but I think where and how we find our self-worth is really critical because it could give us a false sense of self-worth and take us down a path where then we lean into external reasons to build our self-worth. And that can be dangerous on some level, but certainly, I think, misguide us somehow. So let's talk about distractions. What were some of the things that you thought were feeding your self-worth, but that in truth were not really? Let's start with Aunt Lauda.
Well, I remember in school, junior high school, when the competition, we you used to play volleyball, and of course you compete with other schools or whatnot. Yes, you win. I mean, you play the game, you made the tournament, you win. You are so wonderful, but sometimes you feel so proud of yourself, or they give you so much gifts and recognition that you forget about the other group. I mean, the other team, and you humiliate them, unfortunately, saying that you're really worth and they don't worth anything, right? I'm sorry, you don't worth, you're not good at this. And this is so normal for teenagers, I would say, when the competition or the big, the big games that we see there. I mean, give me a break. Any person can fall, can fail in certain times because it's all about luck, experience, support. It's not really about worth, self-worth, right? So you realize that afterwards. But of course, many times you even confront them. And that's really, really sad.
Yeah, certainly. And I think in sports realm, that's very common, like what they call smack talk and stuff like that, where you're winning or being better at something makes someone, by definition, less than, and your self-worth should not be comparative. It shouldn't be, I'm worthy, you're not. And I think that's definitely one of the external things of sort of social, like you're talking about social recognition and kudos for tasks. And maybe that's a good way to think of it too, when our self-worth is dependent on task completion. That's not really self-worth because that kind of goes back to my earlier discussion of self-esteem, right? Self-esteem is
Self-esteem.
usually fed by accomplishments or not. Then it goes down. Social comparisons, how is my popularity versus theirs? How do I look compared to them? As adults, oh, I'm so great in my career. So now I've got positive self-worth. But when you don't have that, then what happens? Right? So self-worth is something that is consistent and constant, regardless of the external things. So I think that's a good example that you gave, Aunt Lauda. How about you, Mom? What were some of the distractions that you thought were feeding your self-worth, but really weren't?
Well, for example, yeah, based on again how we were taught in our young years, if I would, dress a certain way, I'm worth it and I'm accepted. If you would many a time think of others before you also begin to say, well, I'm doing good. And at the same time, that is not really helping your self-worth. Not that you're going to treat anyone disrespectful, but you have many a time to think of your well-being first. And that was a notion also very strong in the 1950s that you have to give of yourself, before thinking of you. And that would take away, that's why at the end, if you stop being a wife, you stop being a mother, you stop being that, then what? So your self-worth is what you have inside and you're valuable. in spite of whatever circumstances. It has nothing to do with how people, what people think of you, how great you're doing socially or something like that at work. Is what your inside value, your intrinsic, what you give positive of you, how you feel, and practically what you are.
Yeah, exactly. So when I talk about my own distractions, I think that's just it, right? Like I defined myself by my accomplishments. And I think part of that is because as I got older, a lot of my efforts were driven by academics and achieving some high success in something very task oriented. And I think my teachers naturally fueled that and fed that, I think with good intentions. But I think I started to define my self-worth by only if I achieve the best, right? So when I fell from that in any situation, it really took me to real low places, right? Like I'm not worthy, I don't have value because I've lost that status, or I did poorly in that thing, right? And I think even career-wise, same thing, because, I had a certain sense of what I had to become. And when I detoured from that, I immediately felt again like I'm not worthy, I don't have value. So really rethinking that, we're going to talk about some of the tools that have helped us to strengthen our self-worth. And you've hinted at some of those things, but just rethinking and resetting, as you say, Mom, and a lot of this is something that is within you, that is a constant, and it's not reliant on those external things, right? And for people who are looking at ways to do that, we're going to talk about some specific tips, but I am curious what each of you has done to really focus on building your self-worth. And so we'll start with Aunt Lauda.
Well, I definitely believe in introspection. Introspection is a process of looking inward to observe and analyze your own thoughts, emotions, ideas, and motivations. When you learn how to do that introspection, you will see how valuable you are, and I also believe that we are all unique. God made us and broke the model. He made us in his own image and likeness. So we're perfect, but we have to believe it, right? So it's up each of us, it's up to us to believe it in spite of challenges in life, because we all have challenges in life. So
Well
I
said.
think that's what it is for me.
Yeah. How about you, Mom? Would you add anything to that?
Well, definitely, you have to see yourself inside, and that's what it would happen to me specifically. That I would think of other people's thinking, and how I was looked, and you forget that what your worth is inside. So I had to learn, and I have to be reminded that what you are inside never changes, despite you will always be. If you're married a wife, if you want your children, you'll always be a mother. There'll always be your babies, but you have a self-worth that you reminds and actually gives you the strength to continue in difficult times. What you're worth, regardless. I have family that have lost their house, for example, in a fire, and horrible things like that. And yet, despite of how you feel or what you're surrounded of, you have your self-worth and your belief that you're going to get through that, because you're going to. And there are many difficult situations in life. I insist, I learn constantly on coming from that base of your self-worth, and then everything else, without being part of the world, without being part of the family, without being disrespectful to others. But first, you think about your self-worth, and you go from there.
Yeah, and I think to add to what you're saying, I think it's a real intentional. I think, Mom, at one point you said mindful. It's an intentional, mindful practice of looking inward periodically to really define for yourself what your self-worth is. And with that, it's also externalizing the negative thinking that comes in when something happens to us. I think it's natural to for a lot of folks, maybe not everyone, to go inward and think negative thoughts, but to pause and to say it out loud even, but externalize it and challenge those negative thoughts. The other thing is to stop using words like should or must, like I should or must do or be this, We have a saying, it's kind of a joke, stop shoulding on yourself, because I think a lot of us say, I should do this, or I should be here, or I should be here at this point. And a lot of that influences that negative thinking that then gets internalized and then brings down our self-worth. And ask yourself, am I the main character in my story, or am I a supporting character? Do I really give myself the space to matter? Right? Like we have to create space for ourselves to matter too. And that's why I say, amongst the distractions is relationships, because sometimes we rely on a relationship to determine our self-worth. And that's incredibly dangerous, right? Because when that, like you've said, both of you, when that ends, then what? Right. But also in that relationship, you might give so much to that other person because you think they're more worthy than you are, right? They matter so much more. And that's risky for yourself, right? Because then what happens to your own needs? So there are some things that people can do in addition to what we've talked about, like some of the questions I've thrown out to think about to just figure out what your self-worth is looking like right now, to think about what my distractions are. And there's lots of worksheets out there. Some of them help you do that intrinsic reflection. Some is like completing sentences like, I'm really proud of, and finish the sentence. Something that makes me unique is, right? Because what we're talking about is what is our value? What's it embedded in? What's unique about us? Another has you rate your feelings about certain statements and then see how you can improve the ranking of that statement or the score of that statement. Statements include things like, I respect myself, and then you scale like how strong that is or how weak that statement is. I believe in myself, and I'm happy to be me. Those are three statements that I think are really critical to creating a foundation for our self-worth. And as we've said in other situations, if you're really struggling to figure out what your self-worth is, or to really find ways on your own to strengthen your self-worth, of course, professional help is also a great way to do that, because you have a neutral party who can help reflect things honestly back to you for you to think about and to help you build those skills. All right, well, that was another good conversation. I really hope people give us in the comments section some thoughts about what we talked about, like how do they see their self-worth? What are the things that create self-worth, and what have been your own challenges in really defining and strengthening your own self-worth? Because I think it's always helpful to hear from others what tools they use, right? Things that we maybe didn't mention. For sure, if you liked the conversation, hit the like button and the subscribe button, because we have a lot more coming. Yeah, and we'd also love to hear what you want to hear more about. So before we wrap up, we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Joanna, and my aunt,
Laura?
and my mom.
Anna,
And we want to remind you all, whether it's good, bad, or funny,
live
live
it
it
Live
up.
it
up.
up.